Tonight, a report by a team of United Nations investigators was published. It says the Israeli naval blockade was legal, but that the Israeli forces involved in the operation used excessive and unreasonable force, and that Israel should make an appropriate statement of regret and offer payment to those who were injured and to the families of those who died. Turkey expelled the Israeli ambassador and suspended all military cooperation between the two countries. It's insisting on a formal apology from Israel. Well, we'll hear from the Turkish government in a moment. But first, I asked the Israeli MP Einat Wilf, who is a close ally of the Defense Minister Ehud Barak, if she accepts the UN report's conclusions.
It's a report that clearly vindicates and exonerates Israel on the major issues. It says that the blockade on Gaza is legal and legitimate and justified, that boarding ships that intend to break the blockade in international waters is also completely legal, and that Israel and the Israeli soldiers met with violent resistance on board the Mavi Marmara. And it also shows the value when Israel does cooperate, that the UN reports can on occasion be very balanced.
Do you agree that the use of force by Israeli forces was excessive and unreasonable?
Naturally, this is a judgment, unlike the other things which have to do with fact. So this is a judgment. I think we do not share that judgment. One only has to compare with all the other ships where there was no violent resistance and things went very smoothly. We think this is a judgment that is part of a larger problem, that somehow whenever Israel exercises its right to self-defense, somehow it's always viewed as being excessive and unreasonable and disproportional.
Nevertheless, relations between Israel and Turkey are still pretty bad, probably worse than they've been for quite a long time. That matters to Israel, doesn't it?
It matters to Israel very much, but I'm not sure it has something to do specifically with this event. I think this has been a long process by which Turkey has made a strategic decision to turn east, to establish itself as a leader in the Muslim and the Arab world, in many ways to return to the 19th century. And the relationship with Israel has become collateral damage. I wish that it were possible for countries to establish their credentials as leaders in the Arab and Muslim world without going into Israel against Israel, and that there would be more credible and constructive ways of doing so. But unfortunately, it still seems to be a very effective way to establish your credentials as a leader in the Arab and Muslim world.
What Turkey says is that if Israel were prepared formally to apologize for what happened during that raid, then relations would improve. That's not such a great price to pay, is it?
It is. First of all, the report doesn't call for Israel to apologize.
It calls for a statement of regret.
And Israel has been clear that it would make that statement and that it would be even ready to compensate the families.
So you're arguing about the difference between regret and apologize?
Well, you could say the same thing to the Turks. They're the ones who are insisting on that difference. Just as the Turkish people and the government have their sense of honor and self-respect, so do we. We think that words matter as well. And we think that we did nothing that should demand an apology. We do regret the consequences, but this was not something of our own making.
The Israeli MP Einat Wilf speaking from Jerusalem.